Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today's video is featuring some new products from Spellbinders and Simon Hurley. This is the halftone Christmas. I'm using mostly the folk art ornaments. I had intended on using that cute little candy cane background, but I'm just going to, today's story time is this card. So I'm going to show you a couple of things here. This is, they have hot foil sentiments, which I rainbowed, and then I was playing around with his lunar paste and his inks, and this is one of the ones that I worked on. This background is the lunar paste with the candy cane stripe. This one is the halftone Christmas. So I will explain all of this shortly. But what we're going to make is should have been a one layer card. Didn't really work out. But before we get too far into it, Spellbinders, you guys know they come out with these amazing collections all the time, you know, collaborating with other artists. They are currently, if you love their kits, they currently have a sale that is past club kits. So if you buy one, then you get one free. They also have a Glimmer Foil Fiesta, so 40% off of Glimmer hot foil products if you're into that. And then their clearance section is always fantastic. They're always adding new stuff to it, which you guys all know. I love a good deal. So here, my intention was to do a one layer card. And so I'm stamping them down. I am masking them. Here is where we went horribly awry. I only cut 2 masks because I knew I wasn't going to be doing any ink blending, and so I needed the 2 masks to cover up these 2 bells that I had stamped, and so that I could get the third one in the middle. After that, I decided that I was going to put something in the background, and in this set they have like a sprig of mistletoe and a sprig of pine, and I opted to go for the pine. And I was like, I'll just move my masks around as needed. I didn't do that. I didn't do that at all. So right now the bells, the one in the middle and the one on the right is masked, and I am going to go ahead and stamp this down. I originally intended this video to be coloring the metallics because, you know, we're coming up on the holiday season. You definitely see the metallics more often. And so if you're somebody who's looking, you know, to color the most common, gold, silver, copper, I wanted to give you some color combinations to kind of start off your holiday season right, which will still be included. And if you want to just know what those are, it's at the end, like you'll see it as we're coloring, but like I listed them out on the screen at the end of the video. But while I was getting these positioned, I was so focused on trying to figure out how I was going to get them positioned. I forgot to mask one of the bells, and you're going to be able to see it happen. I left it in here because I think that it's important. I think it's important to share when we make errors or we make mistakes and how to recover from them. Obviously, you can see at the end of the day, we're still, you know, we still have this card. So here I'm cleaning my stamp really well because I just want to stamp a portion of it. And I wanted to make sure that the rest of it wasn't going to get ink anywhere I didn't want it. I just kind of want the tip of this little pine in between my 2 bells. And then here is where things are going to go horribly awry. So I'm messing around with it, trying to figure out how I'm going to get this done. And this bell is not masked. Okay, this is about to happen. So I stamped it and then realized there's no mask. So now I have to come up with a game plan of how I'm going to fix this, because at this point I'm really invested in this, right? So I know that I'm removing my masks so I can see what I'm working with. So my first go-to is, can I just cut it off? That's what I'm looking at. And the answer to that was no. I could not just cut it off. It would not look right. I needed a third bell. So now I'm like, okay, I can't cut it off. What can I do with it? And I knew, all right, if I stamp another one, I can cover it up. But I could not just cover up one of them. Like I couldn't have just extra dimension on one of the bells. So in order, I put my mask back down on my middle bell, but the one on the left is also going to have to be stamped and fussy cut out because they need to be even. They need to be level and balanced and make sense. So I already know, okay, how I'm going to fix this is I'm going to stamp 2 bells separately, trim them out, and then place them over top of these bells. So 2 of them will have dimension, 2 of them will not. And you can see when I stamped them originally, I put the one in the middle just slightly higher so that it would look like it was recessed behind the other 2 bells, and that's still going to be the case. So all of the things that you saw in the beginning were me. So I sat down and I had a ton of, like, Simon Hurley has great, you know what I mean, color palette. It's all super bright and fun and shiny and shimmery. And I wanted to use all of it. I wanted to use it all. And so I sat down and started playing around with it, and I realized that nothing was looking right. Let's talk about the card. So here, for coloring my little sprigs of pine, I am going in with my lightest color. I chose to do more of a blue-green versus a green-green because I felt like they kind of matched what was going on with the design of the bells. Now, there's beautiful ornaments in this stamp set, and my original intention was to use as many of them as I could. But what you got is this one bell. Because sometimes it just works out like that. So I wanted to use all of the things, and I think that happens not just to me, but to us, you know, as crafters, as card makers, where we just are trying to use it all, and not all of it can be used at the same time. So I went through, I swatched out all my colors, I swatched out my lunar paste, you know what I mean, so I could see what I was working with, and then I watched some of his videos, which, you know, I have quick tips and different ways that you can use things because I'm new to this product, and so I wanted to make sure that I was educated on it and what it could and could not do. Back to the card. So here, I just wanted to point out that when I'm doing the coloring, like, I'm adding shading from the center out, but you really want to try to avoid this quote unquote wall of color. You want to try to vary the length of your strokes, because otherwise you're going to end up with this super dark center and really light tips. And obviously, you know, when you look at something, created in nature, there's always varying tones and things like that. So when you're coloring them, try to make sure that you're varying the length of your strokes. So it's not just one big block of each individual color. And I like to go lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest typically. But sometimes I do make exceptions to the rule if it just makes sense. So here with my darkest color, I'm not even putting it on every little sprig of pine. I'm kind of picking and choosing to get that color variation, but still maintain my dimension. So maybe like every second or third, I'm putting a little bit of the darkness, and I'm leaving some of them a little bit lighter. I'm not going to bore you with the coloring of all of it, but I did want to show you here, I colored through the bell. And the reason that this is kind of important to do is because you want to make sure that when your bell is sitting on top of it, even though we're cutting it out, that it's makes sense, that you don't have like empty or uncolored spots that are behind it. So if you're gluing an image on top of it, you want to make sure that on the background you're coloring through it so that you have color on each side. And again, just reiterating that, we don't have that wall of color, that we're varying the strokes for each of the kind of the sprigs that we're creating. Some of them you may want to make darker, where it would make sense to. So like if it's coming up from behind the bell, the sprigs might be a little bit darker. So now we're going to move on to the bells themselves. These ones are, I'm not going to lie to you. You guys know I'm very transparent. It is a little bit more challenging because there's so many designs on this bell. That is also what makes it very pretty. But if you were doing a bell that did not have all of this, like kind of what I would envision to be painted on detail, you could do this with just stripes. And the stripes would give you a good amount of shine. We're just heading into the holiday season, so I'll see maybe if I can find a bell or something similar to re-show the technique. But I did it on nail polish bottles once, and I'll try to find that video to link it at the end so you can see. But basically I'm doing a center highlight, and so I'm adding shadows where like the little berries are sitting on top, and then I'm going to add shading from the left and the right. If you have colors that are similar, that would, like if you have the hex chart, I do. I have Sandy Allneck's hex chart. So it'll show you colors that are very similar, that sit next to each other. Like, please don't feel like you can't substitute them out. But this is just the colors that I used to create the 3 different metallics, and I didn't color them so that there was a huge glaring shine on them, though you can, but that is a little bit more challenging to do when you're working around all of the little details. So basically I'm just going to go through, I'm going to add shading to the left and the right hand side, leaving the center portion the lightest. For the actual like ringing portion of the bell, the part that hangs down, I added shadow underneath where it's coming out from the main body of the bell. And then I like to color my light source as if it's shining from the right hand side. So all my shadows would be down and to the left. So that's what I went with. But you just want to create a little bit of a highlight on one side or the other. Or you could do it directly in the center. That would be fine too. So now at this point, I'm back out to my lightest color, and I'm just going to go through and make sure everything's kind of blended. If you color on some of the areas, like, don't sweat it. I totally did. I definitely got some yellow on my leaves. But I knew that the colors I was using were going to be dark enough to cover it up, so I didn't, spend a whole lot of time worrying about it. Let me apologize for my allergies again today, because, that's just where we live at. That's where I do anyway. It's very unfortunate. So I am a little sniffly yet again. For the silver, I only use 3 colors. You could for sure add in a C7 to just get a little bit more dimension, but I wanted it to be very kind of light. But I'm doing the same thing, except for I'm coloring right over those images. Again, this is because I know that the colors that I'm using are going to be dark enough to cover over it. So I'm not going to stress about having to go in between all of those little leaves and everything else. It's literally not going to have any effect on my coloring by the time that I'm done with it. So I'm not going to worry about it. Which is probably another reason why I didn't go out to a C7, to be honest. So I could just make it nice and quick and easy. And so now we have the gold and the silver, and then we'll move on to the copper. I guess the main difference for the copper is it is going to be a little bit more reddish. So I used an E53, but you could definitely swap this out for an E33. They're pretty close in color. And then I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to add the shading from the left and the right, and then underneath the little berries at the top of the bell. So anyway, I was trying to make all of these things kind of go together. And so I did, originally, I stamped out a bunch of the ornaments in a background in just black. And I figured, okay, well, I can show, how you can color them individually. I stamped them out in colors. And I was like, okay, I can show, how you can get shading with just your, gray markers. I stamped them out. I used the lunar paste. I used it with a foam blending brush. I used it by itself. I die cut it. I did all of these things. I super loved the halftone Christmas, the The nice thing about the halftone is that it already kind of has the shading added in for you. I really, really loved that, and I wanted to use it, but it didn't go with, like, the styles didn't go together. And sometimes that can totally be a vibe. Like you're, kind of smushing two different styles together and making your own thing. But I just couldn't make it work. And it is no reflection on the collection. It's just I was trying to do too many things at once. And I really couldn't commit to one thing or the other. And it was really creating like this crafty block for me. And instead of setting it aside and walking away, I just kept trying to force it. Which I think is my own personal, like I need to find a balance. And, I know there's other crafters that I know that I'm friends with that have done the same thing. And they're like, you need to walk away, but you just keep going at it. You just keep trying. And that's pretty much what I did. And so the cards that I stamped on the background, I was like, okay, well, I'll show how you can stamp them in black and color them, or stamp them in color and color them, or I can show how you can create a, kind of a scene card with one stamp. That's what you're seeing. Because at the end of it, once I got to this card, I was like, you know what? This is the one, like, this is more my style. This is the one I really like. This is the one that feels the most complete to me. And so that is why this is the one that you're getting. The rest of them are all kind of just in pieces, parts. And maybe I'll be able to use them on another card. I'm sure that I will. But I just needed to stop trying to force myself to do it. You know what I'm saying? So just know that sometimes it's okay, even if you're working on a project or you're in the middle of a project, that it's okay to be like, you know what? This isn't working for me. I'm going to come back to it. So now we're going to the coloring of the details now that we've covered all the metallics. And for this, I really just kept it very traditional. Some people are, my girlfriend Dawn and I were just talking about this. Some people are more traditional in their color schemes, and that is me, and which is why I sometimes find it hard to continually make Christmas cards, because I find it hard to kind of break out of those traditional colors. But I have a goal this year to kind of force myself to use a different color scheme or use a different kind of style, something less traditional. These are very traditional and I love them. Like this folk art kind of vibe reminds me of like Christmases when I was growing up and the ornaments were kind of hand painted and things like that, which I am totally here for. So I did bring in some of that blue-green into the bells as well, just so that my pine needles wouldn't seem completely out of place. And then for the only shading I did for the red was just the berries at the top. Filled the whole thing in with my lightest color, added shading where the points where they meet, or to like kind of the base of them for that one that's sitting right in the front. I just really added it to the base and just worked out to my darkest color. I will show you this a second time where I'm just going in from darkest to lightest, and you will find that sometimes on these smaller images that really does work better because you have such a limited area there. It's very tiny real estate that sometimes it's easy to kind of blow out the lines or bleed the color, especially if you're heavy-handed like I am. So here on this one, I just wanted to show you the, just starting with the darkest and then going out to the lightest. Because these images are so small, the blending is fine. If you get into bigger images, it's more important to kind of do layers. But if you're just doing a very small portion of an image, it's perfectly acceptable to just go over it once. I just color the way that I do because I know I'm heavy-handed, and if I start with my dark, sometimes I have a hard time hanging on to my highlight. But that's just knowing yourself and your own personal style. So once that is done, Then I'm going to move on to coloring the underneath. And I'm not really sure what, like, maybe these are bells that are kind of hanging over a mantle. Maybe they're hanging on a tree and you can only see certain portion of the vine, or the certain portion of the, tree, or, I just wanted something that was going to ground them. And I ended up making them floating. Isn't that hysterical? Like, I was trying to ground them and I floated them. So I'm just going to do like a little wood shelf that maybe they're hanging over. And I'm doing that by adding my darkest color underneath the sprigs. I'm also going to add a shadow for the bells, which is how I made them levitating. And then just do a really simple wood grain, because there just isn't a lot of, I don't know, shelf to be seen. It's just the bells are so close to the bottom of the card that there really isn't a ton. So I just kind of freehanded some wood lines and blended that out. So yeah, it's just like doing this for a living versus doing this as a hobby. I think sometimes I feel really compelled, like you must create something. You must be successful in creating something. And we talked about this in a little bit in my last video. That isn't always the case. Sometimes it's fine to just set aside, the assignments or the things you feel like, oh, well, this has been sitting on my shelf for, 6 months. I have to use it. Like, sometimes it's going to work out and sometimes it isn't. And that's okay. Like, you have to be able to embrace that. So here, once everything is blended out, I am going to go back in and add those shadows for the bells. I chose a pretty neutral, this is the E40 family, pretty neutral shelf color, because I wanted the bells to be the star of the show. I did use, this is Clear Skies. This is the Simon Hurley ink. I did use that to do my ink blending. It's a beautiful blue. You guys know I love blue. Big fan of those lighter blue colors. And so I just used a blending foam and this instead of my distress inks, and it worked really well. It blended out really nicely. I also stamped with them, and they're pretty good for stamping as well if you don't have any experience with them. I did not before this card. So I am going to go in and do a little bit of outlining for just the bells. I did not outline the sprigs. I didn't feel like that was necessary. It's in the background and it's more supporting the view of these 3 bells. And now I'm going to go in and do my fussy cutting. I'm sorry. I'm going to do the white highlights first. So I did add white highlights to all of the bells, to the little berries on top of the bells, and then I added little dots to the berries that are like painted onto the bells. And I did that for all 3 of them. And now I'm going to fussy cut them. So, tips for fussy cutting. I think we've covered this quite a bit because I do quite a lot of it. Hold the scissors in your dominant hand upright, and then hold the paper in your non-dominant hand and turn the paper, not the scissors. It'll give you a much smoother cut. It makes everything just a little bit nicer instead of like these choppy starting and stopping points. Like obviously you have to start and stop, but like you try to do it in the section of your image that the line actually ends and not in the middle of your line. So you can see I'm using my left hand quite a bit to turn, especially around these holly leaves. And then once I get all of these cut out, I am, just because it gives it just a little bit of a more finished look, and so your paper doesn't have like this glaring white edge. I'm going to go in with a Memento Tuxedo black marker and just kind of go around the edges. And you'll see that it will cover up my boo-boo that we've been working to cover up quite nicely. So if you are a person who, I started to do a video the other day, and I will finish it, and I will probably put it up this coming week. But I started to do one that was like kind of like scene building for beginners. And so I hope that will be helpful. It kind of shows it 2 different ways. So here I'm trying to figure out the placement for my sentiment. These sentiments are from the Halftone Christmas. But they also, if you are a hot foil person, they have the same ones in hot foil in this collection. And they're great. They're like a more traditional kind of font, which I'm totally here for. And I just stamped mine in black. Something else to note. When I made the card, I knew they were levitating and I knew I needed to do something to fix it, but I wasn't really sure what. There's a string that comes in the set that I could have stamped, but it would have cut right through my sentiment. So you'll see in the end photo, not the end of the video, but the photo at the end of the video, that I did end up adding lines with a ruler, just so that the bells were not just levitating over this shelf as, you know, some sort of magic. Which is kind of how they look right now. And, you know, it's okay. Like, I just went back and fixed it. I knew there was something that was, like, off that I didn't love about it, that they were just kind of floating. But, yeah, just add a couple of lines. Let your sentiment break it up. That's what I did. And it turned out fine, and it makes sense, and they're no longer just, you know, floating in midair on their own. So here I'm just using some glue to adhere them right over the ones that I accidentally stamped over. And because we did 2 of them, there is that balance. Nobody's ever going to know that that wasn't my intention, except for those of us who are watching the video. So now I'm going to go in and fill in any areas like that should be colored that weren't colored, like the little blue-green in between like the hoop for the bell, and then I'm going to add in a shadow underneath them. This is really something that's kind of cool that you can do to just kind of bump it up a notch. But basically you're just going to follow the general shape of it, and bells are really easy. The one on the right hand side right now is a little bit off, but I will eventually figure out that I need to round out that right hand side a little more so it's more even. But this is something that's super simple that can just really bring your scene cards up to the next level by adding some shadows. And like here, like I said, I'm going in and, you know, being a little bit more finicky. I'm also adding some shimmer because I love that. And here's where I'm like, okay, you got to fix this. You're going to have to fix this shadow because on the right hand side, it just the shape didn't match. It was too fat on the right hand side and it needed to be a little bit more oval to match the general overall shape of the bell. And that looked much better. So then here's the colors on the right hand side. I hope that you'll head over to Spellbinders and check out all the good things that they have going on. Also, I have that coupon for my glass board if you're interested in that. It's linked below. It's 20% off. And that's it. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.